And we bow and we bend from the beginning of the world till the never end. O Devo Shalom Aleinu, O Devo Shalom Aleinu, Devo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Hi everybody, this is our second week. We are going to be discussing Shabbat, but first a little leftover from last week. So let me share the screen and we can take care of that. So last week we were talking a lot about many introductory things and about how Judaism works, and I mentioned the fact that we have a prayer book that all of us use. What I didn't get a chance to really, and Steve actually asked this question last week, so I thank him for that. You know, is there any room for spontaneous prayer in Judaism? So this is the rabbinic understanding of what we're supposed to do when we are praying, or as I like to say it, trying to pray, because you don't always know if it's successful in that regard. This is kevas and structure over kavanah and intention, and I purposely put it up there as a ratio because they're supposed to be in balance. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes one can overtake the other, depending upon the situation, depending upon the context, depending upon what's going on. But the reality is that, some of us will lean more in the direction of keva and structure. Michael, when you were talking before we even started the recording about the High Episcopal Church, and that's much more structured than the Lower Episcopal Church. Same thing within Judaism, that Orthodox Judaism would be more focused on keva, on structure, and Reform Judaism would be more focused on kavanah, on intent, on passion, on direction, the kind of whole idea that less is more. That if you do less with sincerity, which is, by the way, in the early morning, there's a whole list of things that we say are beyond measure. And in our traditional prayer book, in the structure, but part of it says that you should pray with iyun, with intent. Iyun coming from the word ayin, which means eye, so that you should look at what you're doing and look at what you're saying and make sure that it's sincere. Okay, so now to Shabbat. Let me see if I can, I didn't do this the right way, but I will correct myself. Oh, who did that? Whoever did that did it very well. Okay. So Shabbat is the center of the week. From our perspective, we're either moving toward a Shabbat or away from one. Either toward a Shabbat or away from one. That rather than it being the end of the week and that Sunday becomes a new beginning, when you're into a rhythm of Shabbat, you're either moving toward one or moving away from one. I would think that it's the same thing for those who practice their Christianity very intently and are either moving towards a Sunday or moving away from a Sunday, and then all of a sudden you find yourself moving back. The other thing to mention about Shabbat, of course, is that in the 10 Commandments, which I always look at as kind of the spark plugs of the machine, because there's a whole other 603 mitzvot, commandments, that we talked about last time. We didn't talk about all of them, but I referenced them. It's the only holiday or holy day mentioned in the 10 Commandments, which tells you how important Shabbat is for our Jewish peoplehood. And again, you'll note that I'm going to rarely refer to us as the Jewish religion or the Jewish faith, but rather a Jewish peoplehood, because we are much more tribal than anything else. and our nationality floats within other nationalities, our host cultures that we've been part of. And so that is how we look at Shabbat. Shabbat, again, like the prayer book that's structured, is also part of the way in which we glue ourselves together as a Jewish people. How am I? Let's see. There. Okay, ready. So Shabbat, Sabbath, same word. You may have also heard it in the Yiddish pronunciation. And the thing about the Yiddish pronunciation is that, here, I'm going to start a slideshow so I can do this much easier, I think. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. There, slideshow, okay. Ah. For some, I'm going to have to stop the share for just a moment so I can do this. Getting back. Slideshow from the current slide. Okay, good. So Shabbat is this, it comes from the word Shabbatu, which was an ancient holy day that was commemorated, I believe, by the Babylonians. And it was what connects it to Shabbat or the Sabbath is it wasn't any work. Shabbos is the Yiddish pronunciation. Yiddish kind of puts Hebrew in a vice. As you can see that it does this, it kind of squishes it together, comes out Shabbos. Actually, I spoke this kind of Hebrew until I was about 11 years old or so. Okay, Kodesh, holy. Now, oftentimes when I'm teaching this class face-to-face, I ask about what the word holy means, and people come up with words like sacred. People come up with words like religious. They, come up with words like, I don't know, spiritual, okay? And these are all religion words. These are all words that we sort of reserve for that part of our psyche, that part of our lives. But what holy really means from a Jewish perspective, what Kodesh means, is set apart. And that's why we refer to Shabbat as holy, because it's set off from the rest of the other days. In fact, the tradition even says that the other days were created to support Shabbat, that everything else is there to support Shabbat. And the way that we also look at it, sometimes, although this can get a little bit ethnocentric, and nobody likes to do that, the notion is that we are Kodesh as well. The Jewish people is holy and set apart. It doesn't mean better. It just means set apart. And one of the things that distinguishes us is this whole notion of this Sabbath day. Now, you also know that day, I hope you know, that Jewish days begin at sundown and end the next sundown. One of the reasons for that was because of the way in which people would worship various parts of the created world, and the sun was certainly one of those things. In fact, when ancient Egypt went away from its polytheism, essentially what the one god that they worshiped was the sun. And as I think I mentioned last time, in the ancient world, when it got dark, it got really dark. So Judaism decided to start days at the end of the day. And this goes way, way back in our thinking about this. If you remember the ending of each day, each of the 6 days in creation, it says there was evening and there was morning, a first day, evening, and there was morning, a second day, right? So when you have an evening and the morning, the next evening concludes the day. And there's something very kind of beautiful about it all, and it's a different rhythm. So, one needs to, understand that it is that different rhythm. Okay, so here's a Shabbat table, sort of. It is, where am I? Is it, oh wait, I'm not sure. You know what? I didn't share that, did I? All right, now I get it. Okay. Coming back, sharing the screen. Maybe Max, I should have you do this with me next time. Oh, we'll see. Okay. There, that's so much better. Okay, from current slide. Slideshow. Again? Why can't I get there? Slideshow from the current slide. Okay. So this is a Shabbat table, sort of. You'll see the challah. You see the Kiddush cup, the wine glass. The candlesticks are hiding back here someplace, but I've got a better picture of that for you. But first we have to remind ourselves that Shabbat is not just something nice. It's not just something that we think is good because we unplug for a day and so on and so forth. Shabbat is there because it is a mitzvah. Now, some of you may know the word mitzvah, especially that's the Yiddish pronunciation, and you hear the word mitzvah, and mitzvah means good deed. It doesn't mean good deed. Some of the things that we're supposed to do, that we're commanded to do, are indeed positive actions in the world. In the social sense, and this, well, let's put it this way. You know that bumper sticker that says, perform random acts of kindness, and I can't remember the rest of it, but Judaism doesn't do those acts in a random way. They are mandated. And Shabbat is one of the ways in which we mandate ourselves to get a day to look back, to step away from creation, to do, and our participation in it, to do what artists do when they take a step back and put up a thumb, to block out certain things so they can concentrate on various parts of what they're doing. A waiting room, isn't it? Okay. And it's very, very important that obviously from an Orthodox perspective, it's very important that an Orthodox Jew feel mandated. And mostly that is feeling mandated from the divine, as if it's out to in. From the Reform point of view, we're more, a better expression would be that we feel commanded from the inside out. We need to establish and nourish our own sense of mandate, our own sense of what needs to get done in the world. For instance, it's not, I don't give to somebody when I will go back and walk freely into the 7-Eleven again, but when there's somebody out there who is clearly poor, clearly homeless, I have to give to that person. I'm not waiting on my emotions to feel empathetic or sympathetic to that person. I must give to that person, whether somebody did it before me or not, whether somebody will do it afterwards or not. I can't depend on that. I see that person and I need to ask, is there any way I can help you? I'm going to get, okay. 7-Eleven has very, very good cookies. And sometimes I'm very tempted to get them. And so I will say to this person, I'm going to get an oatmeal raisin cookie. Would you like an oatmeal raisin cookie? And they'll say, no, I'd rather have chocolate chip. And so I'll get them a chocolate chip cookie. Whatever I can do for that person, I will do for that person at that moment. And I think that makes, it makes things more secure when we do it that way. It enables us to know that the work that needs to get done will get done. We're not waiting for people. And so here are the things that you can't do on Shabbat. These are mitzvot too. These are mandates about what you may not do. Now, important to note that these are not listed in the Torah. These are not listed in the 5 books of the first 5 books of the Bible. This is a rabbinic understanding. When it says in the Torah, you shall not work on this day, it shall be a complete Sabbath of the Lord for you. Many of you know that phrasing. The rabbi said, well, what's work? And so they looked at the prominent project in the Torah was the building of the tabernacle, that portable sanctuary that we used in the desert before there was a permanent temple in Jerusalem many, many centuries later. And so they said, well, these are the things that need to get done in order to build the tabernacle. And this is the order of bread. And the reason we call it the order of bread is because it's all this stuff that happens that depends on things coming out of the ground. So now you may say, well, wait a minute, how does planting have to do with building the tabernacle? Well, obviously what it does is it creates the materials that ultimately you will use in some ways for building the tabernacle. There was all kinds of cloth, there was all kinds of wood, and so on and so forth. So planting, plowing, reaping, gathering, threshing, extraction, winnowing, sorting, purification, dissection, sifting, kneading, amalgamation, cooking, and baking. So all of these, from an Orthodox perspective, one would not do on Shabbat. All of that needs to get done ahead of time. In other words, if you're going to cook or bake something, you have to cook or bake it before Shabbat. Some rabbis will allow their congregants to use what one of the medieval rabbis, his nickname was Rashi. And what Rashi said was, well, there can be a bridge over time, in a sense, a bridge over the time period before Shabbat and when it is Shabbat. And if you start something before Shabbat, you can finish it on Shabbat. So that would mean, for instance, in order to bake a cake, you could crack an egg, put it in the refrigerator, and finish baking the cake on Shabbat. And some rabbis will say, you can't do that. The order of garments, shearing, scoring, laundering, carding, combing wool, dyeing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Very crucial to the making of the tabernacle, which had cloth all around it, and cloth around the Holy of Holies in the middle, and various kinds of cloth and other things, and animal skins as well, that adorn the Holy of Holies. So this is really, really crucial. And again, no Orthodox Jew will do any of this on Shabbat. Whoops. Bread, garments, hides. There, okay. As I said, there were skins that were used in the tabernacle as well. Specifically, there were dolphin skins that were used to adorn the Holy of Holies. There's a wonderful, wonderful midrash about that. So now I'm going to introduce you to the world of midrash, which are stories about the stories. And so here's how the rabbis would think. So they started thinking with dolphin skins. Where in the world did Jews in the middle of the desert get dolphin skins? And one of their theories was that when the Sea of Reeds, which is its technical name, when the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds split and the Jewish people escaped from Egypt, there was a wall of water on one side and a wall of water on the other side. And there were all of these fish that didn't know that there was air in the middle. And if they, kept swimming, they would fall to the ground and die. And so the dolphins, who even in those days were known as one of the most intelligent animals in the ocean. They lined themselves up on these walls of water to protect the other fish and to keep them from going into the air. But when the water came crashing in on the Egyptians, many of the dolphins died because they were speared by the spears of the Egyptians, and they washed up on the shore. And again, according to this story about a story, Moses said, I don't know why this happened, but we should skin these animals and keep them. They'll be for something. And sure enough, of course, it was commanded of the Jewish people that they use dolphin skins to decorate the Holy of Holies, where the Ten Commandments were, and later where Moses' staff would be as well, where the ark was, and which looked very much like it does in Raiders of the Lost. Okay. Construction, writing. Now, obviously, all of this has to do with architecture and so on and so forth. Writing, erasing, construction, demolition, extinguishing a fire, ignition of a fire, final completion, fine-tuning, perfection, transferring between domains. Meaning that you can't, this last one is you can't carry something from a private domain to a public domain or vice versa. So these are the 39 categories of work that are forbidden on Shabbat. But from these, and I'm on and off taking a class about this online, that you can take a look at these and you can see that it's a value system as well. And it also teaches us that when it's not Shabbat, if we actually meditate on what planting and plowing and reaping is in our lives, even though we're not farmers, if we engage with that and say, well, what are the things that I plant in this world, and what are the things that I plow up, maybe without even thinking about what I'm plowing up, what do I reap from the actions of my sowing, et cetera, et cetera. So these are really beautiful things to think about, and these are work week things, right? These are weekday things. These are not Sabbath things. An example from the Orthodox perspective. I was at an Orthodox synagogue, not far from where we are. It's kind of straight down Pico, to the east at Pico and Doheny. It's an Orthodox synagogue called Beth Jacob, and there was a rabbi there who, not at the synagogue, but a member of the synagogue, who actually was the head chaplain at Cedars-Sinai Hospital at that point. And it was after the service, and some people caught him in the hallway, and they said, Rabbi, after soon when we get home, a non-Jewish family is coming over, and their kids, it was a rainy day, right, and cold day, and they said their kids really love soup. Can we make them soup? And the rabbi said, no, because it would be ignition. Where is that? Ignition, yes? Lighting a fire in order to do that. Even if it's electricity, that's ignition. And, if they had asked me, I would say, of course. Better to feed these children who really love soup and are cold on a cold and rainy day than you not take care of them and they have a bad experience with Shabbat. Okay, here's the exception: saving a human life. If in any way someone's life is in danger, you can break any of these 39 categories in order to get this person saved. What about an animal life? Certainly as a Reform rabbi, I would extend it to animals as well. It's, by the way, one of the reasons that even on Orthodox kibbutz in Israel, a communal farm, they will make sure that the cows and the goats get milked on Shabbat, because otherwise they can get sick. So those kinds of things are taken care of and certainly are included in uh, our 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 thought about what Shabbat is. You know, that Shabbat is, it's not something that anybody should die for. It's something that we should live for. And it's by the way, one of the ways it's expressed in the liturgy is that it is this connection. It's part of the covenant between us and God, everything that there is, you know, all that there is. You know, it's the way in which we touch because we pull back and we say, okay, we are people who very freely go about our business and interact with this world. And sometimes we don't even think about what we're doing. And all of the things that we're not permitted to do cause us just to sit down, have dinner, have breakfast, have lunch, have another dinner, and then end Shabbat, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, and spend it with people, spend it with family, spend it ruminating, in a sense, on what it is that we've done during the week and how we've impacted society and the planet at large. Okay, so I emphasize with here. Here's a better picture of Shabbat candles, right? By the way, they don't all have these little hurricanes on them, but you know, hurricanes are nice. So a blessing with candles, and this is grabbing a marker in time, or making a marker. Whoops, making a marker in time. And here's here's this great. This is great tradition that you may have seen. So if you can see me, I'm moving my hands toward my eyes, right? I talked about this with my mother last week, right? That she did this. Say the blessing, cover my eyes, because we've got a problem with this, which is that once you light one candle, it's Shabbat. How can you light the other one? How can you ignite the second flame? And you can't use this one to ignite it. So we do a little bit of a mental trick or emotional trick, and we hide ourselves and poof, look, they're both, you know, we hide our eyes and poof, they're both lit. Isn't that wonderful? But what this tries to do is mark this moment. From the time I light this candle, certainly by the time I get to the second one, it is Shabbat. So in a sense, Shabbat doesn't happen organically. It's not about the rhythm of the universe. It's about our rhythm with the universe. And that's why we're using these candles. That's why it's a blessing with. We are using the lighting of the candles as an excuse, as a marker, as a symbol of how we're separating regular time from holy time. Okay. And then also on Friday, this is, by the way, this is all sundown and this happens 18 minutes before sundown. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, I can't recall. 18 minutes putting a buffer around a mitzvah, a buffer around a commandment, so that you don't even get close to transgressing Shabbat by lighting them too late. You light them 18 minutes before Fritz Coleman tells you that sundown is. Good. Celebrating creation and joy. Obviously, these Kiddush cups are filled with red wine. Red, the tradition is that it's red because it's rich, and we can see that compared to a white wine. These are just two typical shapes of a Kiddush cup. This one I wanted to show you because this is marvelous contraption that, it's like one of those chocolate fountains or something, except it's a Shabbat fountain or wine fountain. You pour wine in here and it drips out into all the cups for the table. And here, it's supposed to be a kos maleh. It's supposed to be a full cup to demonstrate the bounty with which we've been blessed, and also that our joy and our bounty is overflowing. So with that, you get to see, this is many Kiddush cups will come with a plate underneath. Now, I do want to say something. Blessing with wine, I should have put the word kiddush here, which I didn't. Kiddush, Kiddush. It's a toast to Shabbat. And that toast includes two different major references. One is to the commandment for keeping Shabbat. But the reason that we do that is so that we remember the creation that we're part of and how wonderful that is. And number two is Egypt, because only free people get to have this. Huh? Okay, and this is challah. We call this prayer hamotzi or motzi. Ha, as we discussed last week with the first word of the Torah, Bereshit. If it was Bareshit, it would be specific. So it would be the beginning. This is the motzi. This is, it actually is referring to God as hamotzi, the one who brings out, the bringer forth of bread from the earth, which we don't take literally. I mean, it's poetic phraseology, that it's as if bread was brought forth from the earth, but we also know that it's quite a process that enables this to happen. So I usually make it a practice before we say the blessing for this, that we acknowledge the people who planted and plowed and sowed and separated wheat from chaff and made it into flour and enabled us to have, and the people who baked it, the people who brought it to our table, who enabled us to have bread. I think it's also very, very important that that so here's our wine and our bread, and nothing, as we talked about last time, transubstantiates. It stays exactly what it is, but once again, we're using the bread to grab the moment. Bread to grab the moment. And challah has two references. Challah is a portion of a sacrifice that was thrown into the fire in the tabernacle and later in the temple in Jerusalem, just to make sure that that really is something from that sacrifice that does get burned up and rises to God, as it were, metaphorically. And this challah represents that sacrifice as well, the sacrifice that would happen just before Shabbat. It also represents the manna in the desert, or it's sometimes mispronounced or anglicized to manna, but it is manna. And the manna in the desert was some sort of fungusy, spongy thing that could taste like creamery butter or, just a fine piece of meat or whatever else you wanted, or wonderful fresh vegetables. But if there was if you recall your Bible study, there was a double portion that would float down from the sky, again, as a metaphor, for the Jewish people to eat in the desert before Shabbat, so they wouldn't have to gather any on Shabbat. And so that's why we represent the double portion. And just like sacrifices were salted in the temple in Jerusalem, and of course beforehand in the tabernacle, and the salting, by the way, is to take the blood away, because we're not supposed to eat the blood, and we did eat some of the sacrifices afterwards. Certainly the priests did, because they had no other way to eat. So there is still often, as you can see it right tucked in there, a little salt available for people to put that on the challah. And the reason the challah has a cover over it is because it's the last of the three blessings, and we don't want the challah to feel sad because it was last. True. All right. Tzedakah. These are three typical looking tzedakah boxes. A little bit of money gets put into these boxes just before Shabbat, because you can't spend money on Shabbat. So we spend it before Shabbat with the intention that once these boxes are filled, we'll give them to a deserving cause. Now, tzedakah, pushki in Yiddish, okay, which refers to this action of dropping it in the slot. Tzedakah is the closest word that we have for charity, and it isn't. People often translate it that way, but it's not. Tzedakah, and you can see it sort of in here, is based on the word tzedek, tzedek, right? And this is part of my sermon from last week. Whoops, sorry. That tzedakah means righteousness or justice, okay? So even giving charity, as it were, or giving to deserving causes, we don't trust people to do it on their own. We don't trust people to feel motivated to do it. It's mandated. And that's why we do it just before Shabbat. Okay. Let's see how we're doing. We're doing okay. Now, this is the end of Shabbat, Havdalah. And it does indeed have to do with separation between the holy day that we just finished and the beginning of the rest of the week. It has three major symbolic components. One, of course, is wine, again, wine or grape juice, to celebrate creation, which we did all the way during Shabbat, and now we are concluding that specific creation celebration, even though hopefully we will celebrate it all week long. This is a spice box. This one looks like it's kind of a medieval form. You can see the spire. It's really a tower, and it was built to look like a castle. It even has a flag on top that's cut out of this picture. I don't think if I do anything to it, it'll make any difference. Okay. This has sweet smelling spices in it. I would imagine it's much like the incense that is used in Catholic churches or high Catholicism and so on and so forth, high Episcopalianism, but it's really quite beautiful. It's cinnamon, nutmeg, those kinds of things are in the spice box. Sweet smelling. By the way, it's a celebration of variety. That's what the blessing for this says. We do a blessing for variety of creation in the world. This is a Havdalah candle, and the reason I chose this picture and this one is to show you two different kinds. It's a braided candle, as you can see, and it has multiple wicks. We usher in Shabbat with two candles. We usher her on her way into the ether, as it were, with a torch. We light her way with a torch, and that's what this candle becomes. So what are these people doing? You can see it really well here. This hand has a shadow in it. We actually cup our hands. We first spread them out like this and then cup them to make a shadow with the Havdalah candle, because it's the first Shabbat, it's the first light of the new week, and we work with it, right? With these candles, with the Shabbat candles, we're not even supposed to make a shadow. We don't work by these candles. They symbolize and are used for something else. They have a different purpose. And finally, at the end of Shabbat, and you can sort of make out, it's kind of blurred in here, that this is another cup. It's not exactly a Kiddush cup. It's the same shape, but it's not really, there's no Kiddush kind of blessing for that. It's not a toast. And at the end, we douse the flame in the candle. Now, part of this is a medieval superstition that you can imagine that blowing out a candle like this would create a lot of smoke, and people in those times believed that little evilness dwelled in the smoke, and so they would douse it in the flame, douse it in the wine. The other thing that does, by the way, is it demarcates really nicely, the same way that the lighting of the match and the lighting of the candle does at the very beginning of Shabbat. This creates an auditory ending to Shabbat. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound. Okay. Last week you talked about prayer. There's a lot of prayer on Shabbat. We have certainly our 3 services during the day. Of the day, we have an evening service, a morning service, and an afternoon service. And like we talked about earlier and last week, those that's according to a specific order, a seder that is in our prayer book, in our liturgy. Yes, of course, there's plenty of room for spontaneity in between. By the way, you may have seen, pictures or videos of Orthodox Jews praying like this. This is sort of using your biorhythm to pray. And what Orthodox Jews are doing inside and mumbling on their lips, they're doing all of those mandated prayers, but they'll also concentrate on different phrases and words every day. And that's one of the ways that they do it with sincerity. Okay? And so I wanted to give you a little highlight into what we do for our prayers, okay? So this is kind of part number 1. New, what's in a name? That word new, that Yiddish word, so new, it means so what's coming next? What's in a name? This Yud He Vav He, YHWH, Yahweh, yes, that many of you know, is our word that we use for God. Abbreviation of the name of God, maybe not so much a name, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Whoops. And we use this little abbreviation. There's that Yud is taken from here. This Vav gets cut in half to form these 2. I'll explain the vowels in a minute. By the way, in Hebrew, these are the consonants. The little guys underneath are the vowels. And when you read in the Torah, just like this, it has no vowels. So you have to know them. You just have to know out of context and grammar. So we use this in a prayer book so that we don't have to throw which would be, again, the word that represents God, we don't throw that away, right? In fact, I think I did mention that old prayer books, old Bibles, etc., get buried in the cemetery. And so again, the reason you do that is because you'll find it in the prayer book that way. Okay. Okay. So our word that we use for God is really, I just want to make sure I do this and get good. Okay. The word that we use for God, Yud He Vav He, means to be. This is the root. You see this He here, and this Vav in the middle. This means either is or was or will be. There's it's all tenses at the same time. Now, this is y right there. That sound. This is a ho. This hey and a dot on top, and there's a kamatz under here, so it's va. This letter repeats twice in a sense. Yehovah, right? Jehovah. That's where the Jehovah's Witnesses get it from, which is, however, the vowels are borrowed from the word Adonai. And Adonai is another word that you may have heard me use or other Jews use for God, as it were. But it really, it's not this word. Adonai means my Lord, in a very formal sense. And so it's a substitute, it's a surrogate for using this, because the only time that Orthodox Jews, for instance, will use this word is during prayer. They won't even use it when they're reading the Bible to study. They will say the name, or Hashem, as it comes out. The Hebrew is Hashem. Arthur Waskow says this beingness is the interbreathing of all life. I like that a lot. So here's that word Adonai. So when we come to this word, which is a Y and an H and a W or a V and an H, right? There is no way that out of those letters you can say Adonai, because it's these vowels. There's one, there's a sneaky one at the top, and this one gets borrowed into here so that we remember to say Adonai instead of God's name. Now, I should explain God's name, God's word, that even in ancient times, apparently this name, this word was never said out loud, certainly not in public. It was said by the high priest, the first one was Aaron, who would go into the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle on the holiest day of the Jewish year, which is Yom Kippur, and we'll talk about that. And he would pronounce this name. When the Romans sacked Jerusalem in the year 70, and the priesthood was essentially disbanded and on the run for their lives, no one knew how to pronounce this name anymore. At least that's the way that we understand it. And so we don't even say it. This is all we'll say. We won't even say those letters that are YHWH. We'll always say Adonai, okay? And you may have heard Elohim or Eloheinu. El was just a common word for Jews and for others for a God, right? In the Middle East. So the word Elohim, which is interesting because it's plural, is sort of our way of talking with other ancient nationalities and saying, you know what? Your many gods is one for us. It's Adonai, so therefore Yud He Vav He is really not a name, it's a description. You may have also heard this phrase, Ehiyeh Asher Ehiyeh. This is what God says to Moses when Moses said, listen, do you like have a business card or something? I'm about to go back to Egypt. No one's going to know who I am, right? And God says, I will be what I will be. I am what I am. Once again, this is the verb to be. That's all it is. All of this is just the verb to be. So being, existence, everything that is and was and will be in whatever shape it takes is God. And so here are some other epithets that we have used. Presence, Shekhinah, this is feminine presence actually of God. Ein HaChaim, source of life, the wellspring, that is this too, Ma'ayan. Ein Sof, that which has no end, but it also means it has no beginning. Hamakom, every place is a place that God is. Shmo Echad, his name is one. Ma'ayan again, Brecha, a pool, an ever deep pool of life-giving forces. Breath of all life, one soul, Nishmat Kol Chai, the breath of all life. And here I've just kind of put them all together. Here's God, ever emerging infinite pool and fountain flow beyond conception, revealed and present in all, intimate and elusive. And this is our blessing formula. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, right? Blessed are you, Lord our God. I've left out the phrase king of the universe, literally, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us. This, you already know, is my way of translating things. We are in awe and wonder before and within the oneness of all. Then we get a specific one. This is for lighting the candles for Shabbat. What I should tell you about this is that even though this is considered to be one of the 613 commandments, you can't find this in the Torah. The rabbis inferred it, that somehow we had to start Shabbat, and they developed the custom of lighting a candle. I usually do this in 2 sessions. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, so now we can unmute you all and get us back in business here.
You know, Gail and Max, I love the parts. I love it the part that everything is everything. You know, the names of God that you know, I didn't really write things down, but
That's all right.
that
That's what I'll send it to you.
everything circles back to the one thing and circles out to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, simultaneously.
yeah, that's the part that appeals to me the best. So.
Mm-hmm.
And Neil, you seem to be, the Judaism as you practice it goes back to that sort of thinking again and again, doesn't it?
It does, you know, in a sense, you know, you really can't escape it, especially when you know you look at this word that we use to represent God in a sense, right? It's not even a name, right? Because that, in some senses, putting a name on God is too little, right? It not, you can't possibly encompass all of it, right? um and I don't say it with, you know, any sense of you know, meaning, you know, non-gendered or less than. It can be all genders, and I'm not trying to, you know, neuter it in any kind of way, but there's this holy it, you know, that is infused into everything and is everything. Um, and every time I look at that word and you know, and take a breath, you know, I remember that that's what I'm in. It's the soup that I'm in, which is not necessarily a physical soup either. So.
Neil, how strictly do you keep the Sabbath, and how has that changed over your life?
Ah. Well, when I was a kid, Shabbat was always Shabbat in our house. So we always gathered together for Friday night dinner. We would do things on Shabbat. You know, my mother didn't drive, so my father would take my mother on an excursion of shopping and all kinds of other things. But my mother, you know, I found out later, did all of her housework before Shabbat. She got it all done because that's how she grew up. And we didn't do Havdalah or anything like that. I didn't even know about it until I was much older. By the time I was in college, I was keeping Shabbat sundown to sundown. You know, and it's kind of ironic because my schoolwork was all Judaica, but I didn't do any of it on Shabbat because I would be writing and taking, you know, I would be doing all that. And then when I went to rabbinical school, I mean, to be honest, keeping Shabbat in Jerusalem it's not hard. You know, it's it's the one city in the world that shuts down for Shabbat. So it sort of allows you, you know, to have it happen. And, you know, it's really quite wonderful and quite beautiful. And, you know, and then, well, I do remember in high school, this is going back a bit, but in high school, I started going with my friends to football games on Friday night, high school football games. Yeah. And then I found out, my mom pulled me aside one day and said, you know, your dad's really upset because you're not here for Shabbat dinner. So, you know, and look, you know, within Orthodox families, you wouldn't even consider doing anything else. It just, you know, right, not even considered. So I try to think that Shabbat is more like an attitude than it is anything else. That if, you know, I can say to myself, you know, I really don't have to do that. It's Shabbat. So I try not to do email on Shabbat. I unplug a little bit. Yeah. I may do Facebook, but not email. Because I don't find that as intrusive. But he's not Orthodox. You know? It's, you know, look at this flower I just saw. You know, it's a day of pulling back. It really is, and especially now. There was a mentor of mine who I tried to get to speak at the temple on Friday nights for years. And finally he said, Neil, stop. He said, I retired from the synagogue. Shabbat is with my family now. Yeah? So, and now it is for me too, family and friends. It's great.
Yeah, great. We have time for one more comment or question.
I got one.
Go ahead, Virginia.
Okay. I heard Rabbi Neil refer to Shabbat as her, using the
Yes.
feminine pronoun. So could you explain a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah. Shabbat is often symbolized as a bride, the Jewish people being the groom, and we get married once a week. And again, it's just a metaphor, you know. It doesn't mean that Shabbat is feminine, but if you think about all of those Marc Chagall pictures with that woman sort of floating, and right, she's Shabbat, and the groom is the Jewish people.
So why don't you wrap us up, Neil?
Well, you know, we wish each other on Shabbat Shalom, which is, you know, Shalom obviously is hello and goodbye and peace, more importantly. So, you know, when we're wishing each other Shabbat Shalom, we're wishing each other a peaceful Shabbat. And I've always found that, you know, people just say it and okay, here's another great thing about Jerusalem is people start saying Shabbat Shalom like at 2:30 in the afternoon, right? In anticipation of Shabbat.
Right.
You know, even now I'll start saying it Thursday night to people, you know, because it's going to be Shabbat. So have a Shabbat Shalom. And what does that mean? Shalom is, you know, as I'll probably tell you many times, is connected with the word shalem, which means whole.
We also give a cake.
Or shalem, which means complete. Okay. So the idea is that you have a complete and whole and uninterrupted and completely supported Shabbat. And I hope, you know, you should try it. You should try unplugging a little bit, sundown to sundown. See what happens. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, yavo shalom aleinu ve'al kulam.